Hello, BookTube. It's Easter weekend here. It's Sunday, and I thought I'd do another installment of my sort of book to film. And this one is Beau, Geste, the book written by P.C. Wren, Percival Christopher Wren. I think that's his full name. And the film was made by William B. Wellman in 1939, Beau, Geste, with Gary Cooper in the title role. Robert Preston, Ray Milland, Brian Donlevy. There's J. Carroll Nash, and even Donald O'Connor is the young Beau, Geste. What's her name? Susan Hayward has a part in it. But yeah, so we'll start again with the book because that's the source material. This is a Dover Thrift Edition. This was put out it says first Dover edition, first published 2019. And it's an unabridged republication of the work originally published in 1924 by John Murray in London. Yeah, Percival Christopher Wren lived from 1885 to 1941, and he's the author of many books. I had thought I'd read this, and I think I did when I was really young. I don't quite remember, though. I'd always thought of it as a juvenile novel. Like for young adults, because it's sort of in the sense, even though it's about the French Foreign Legion, it's sort of in the vein of sort of British Empire type stuff. G.A. Henty or G.A. Henty, I think it is. Henty. That kind of thing. Lots of adventure, war, and that type of thing. But as I say, this one is set with the French Foreign Legion in northern Africa. And it starts out with a garrison, a fort called Zindernhof. And part of the Legion is going there because they've heard that they're under attack. But they arrive. It's all silent. And it would have been attacked by, or the attacking are Arabs or Tuaregs, as they're described in the book. So they arrive. Everything looks fine. It looks like it's being sort of guarded well, but like in the posts and the braziers, which are the cutouts at the top of the fort. It's all manned. But then they get in a little closer and they realize all the ones that are there are dead. And there's no hail. Excuse me. There's no reply to their bugling. Nobody's opening the door or the gates for them. So they don't know what's happening there. They did get a shot, it seems like, from the fort. That was shot at them. But then that was silence. So they have a bit of problem, but they send in their bugler to take a look, and he doesn't come out. So the captain, Major Beaujolais, he climbs up and gets in and finds the sergeant dead with a bayonet in him, laying on sort of the roof, and another Legionnaire soldier laying flat, dead as well. So it was clear that the major was murdered by someone stabbing him with a bayonet. And everybody else is dead. He searches the place. He can't even find the bugler that he sent through. Nothing. And then he goes back up and looks at the bodies, and the cap of the one that's laying flat is ripped open, and then there's a letter in the hand of the major, which he pulls it up, and it's a confession of Beau Geste, saying that he stole the blue water sapphire. And so he's a bit puzzled with this, but he goes down, he opens the gates, and by the time they get back up in with his sort of second in command, the bodies of the major and the legionnaire are gone. They're not there anymore. So because he's trying to figure out why, how this happened, like he was murdered. So they want to send in their men to sort of, get the dead out, bury them and everything like that, but they're afraid. So they wait overnight, and then in the oasis that's nearby, and during that time, a fire starts out and the fort burns down. So then the story fast forwards a little bit to the major. I always forget. Yeah, Major Beaujolais. I think he might be going back to England, but he's on leave, and he meets an old sort of school friend that knows the family, Geste, and everything at this place. So he shows him the letter. He takes the letter, and his name is Lawrence, and he takes the letter because he's been in love with the main woman that's running the abbess. I think it was an abbess, not an abbey, but this big house where the children. There were three brothers, Geste brothers, two twins, twin, and then a younger brother. So he takes it. He takes the confession, gives it to the woman, their aunt, and she won't tell him anything else. Nothing at all about this thing. So he's determined to find out what happened. So what he does sort of find out what's happened to a certain extent. He finds it from a priest that was close to the family, and it looks like that a few years before, the family was gathered, the three brothers, and then there was another sort of cousin, or there was wards, two young women. They're all in their like late teens, early 20s. They gathered together, and they want to look at this sapphire, this gem. So, and then the lights go out because of a storm, and when the lights go back on, the sapphire's gone. So it had to be someone in the room. They all deny it, and she doesn't search anyone, but she's saying, well, I'll give you the chance. There's somebody's a liar, or a thief in this room, so I'll give you overnight to put it back. So what turns out is Beau Geste leaves, and he says he's the one that did it. And then the next day, his twin brother leaves, saying that he did it. And then the younger brother leaves the next day, says that he did it, because they basically didn't want the sort of blame to go on anybody else in the family. And so they figured that the younger one figured if he leaves as well, then the blame will be shifted to all of them. So they wind up, because they wind up in Paris. They joined the French Foreign Legion. Beau Geste, the oldest, he's the oldest of the twins, and then his younger brother Digby. They join. Then the younger brother John joins, and yeah, they're all together, and they do the training in for the French Foreign Legion, and they've got this crazed sergeant major that's above them. He's insane. He's a Frenchman, but he was kicked out of the Belgian Congo because he was too brutal on the slaves there. So it's sort of if it was too brutal for the British Congo, the the Belgian Congo, then this guy is very evil. So anyway, they get split up a little bit. The Digby winds up on sort of the mounted um, regiment, and to do more training. And the John and Beau get sent to this Zindendorf, Fort Zindendorf. So and it turns out that the the commander there, like he dies, and so the I think the next one in line dies, and this sergeant major becomes the leader. And there's going to be the men hate him, and they're going to mutiny and kill him, and then head off across the desert to Morocco or somewhere. Uh, and the Geste brothers refuse to do this, even though they hate him as well. Uh, they've pledged to, uphold the flag, the Legion. So they refuse to, uh, and they sort of side with the sergeant major. Um, but at the moment that they're going to mutiny, or the mutiny's put down, but he's gonna sort of kill them all basically because of mutiny and against their thing. But the Arabs attack, so sort of at the last moment, so they fight and fight and fight, but they keep getting killed off one by one, one by one, one by one, until until basically and they also know there's another evil guy that's there that learns about the gem, and so this sergeant major wants the gem. So it gets dwindled down to the three of them, the two brothers, Jess brothers, and the major. And then the older brother, Beau Jess, gets fatally wounded. And so it's only John and the younger brother and the major. And this takes us right back to the beginning of the book, where he's, the major thinks that his brother's dead, Beau is dead, so he starts, ripping off, and he finds a little packet, so he says he's got the gem, and then he's going to kill them both, or well, he thinks the Beau is dead, but he's just fatally wounded at that point, and he's going to kill John, and John, stabs him with the bayonet, because Beau isn't quite dead yet, and he puts him off balance, so he doesn't shoot him. So anyway, but then Beau dies, and it says there's some letters, and take the packet back to their aunt, and so forth. So he sees the the replacements coming, or the rest of the Legion coming. So he tries to warn them off. He thinks that the Arabs are still there to a certain extent. So he jumps over this side of the fort, and he runs onto the other, into hiding against the dune. And then his brother, which is the bugler that comes in, sees the bodies, realize he makes a guess what happened. So he takes the bodies, and because when they were kids, they always the oldest Beau said he would want a Viking funeral. So he takes him to his bed, and he covers him up, and he gets because there's supposed to be a dog at the foot of the corpse for the thing. So he takes the sergeant major, who's they consider a dog basically, dump him down, and he starts to fire, and that's where sort of the book begins. But then he jumps over the wall and finds out that his brother is still there. And then they meet up. There's two Americans that they had made friends with in the Legion, and they decide to sort of skip town in a sense. But they go south, and they spend a whole year trying to escape and becoming sort of Arab, having adventures, fighting, being captured, almost dying of thirst and everything. And then Digby gets killed in a skirmish with some other Arabs. One of the Americans decides to sort of leave, and because he knows that there's too many of them together, and there's not hardly any water left. But they do get rescued, the one American and John, and he meets the guy Lawrence that got the letter that took it to their aunt, and sort of he tells them most of the story. And this is sort of a year or more later that of the events where it started, and then he does wind up back in England, and he takes the letter to his aunt. And what transpired was that he did take the gem, but the gem wasn't a real gem. The whole story hinges on the fact that when he before this happened, his aunt had sold the gem to someone and had a replacement, and he was nearby, and he heard this about this, and he was afraid that her husband, who was not a very nice guy, who sort of has drained the estate of all the money so he can go out and hunt around the world, would find out that this, it's not real, because he'd want to sell it because it's worth apparently £30,000. So he decided to steal it, to sort of save face for his aunt. And then he absconded to try to get the guilt off of everybody else in the family. So that's basically where the book ends. But it's like the last 25 pages is of them traveling this thousands of 1,000 or more miles across the south in the Sudan, and across the Sudan and back and forth for over a year. And I found that so interesting, and it's like, only 25 pages. I found that more interesting than the novel to a certain extent, the rest of it. But apparently there's 3 other sort of books that are interlinked with this, which I think does tell some of the story of that journey. So it's something that I probably will look at. But getting back to like the book itself, like the style, the writer, it's like I said, I thought it was a juvenile book, but there's so many French phrases in here, and he doesn't. There are no footnotes, so and Dover does not present any explanation of them. But for the most part, you can guess what is being said. However, what made me think that it was a sort of a juvenile one too, because you got the Sergeant Major screaming and calling his underlings, you dirty dogs, you curs, and all this kind of stuff, and no sort of swear words. So I thought, well, obviously this is 1924, they couldn't really put expletives in a book, so that sort of makes a sense that it could be a juvenile book. But I'm not sure how many 14 or 15-year-old, presumably boys, would know all these phrases in French unless they went to English public schools. But anyway, and it wasn't sort of swearing. This was, and that was a bit unbelievable, because there is a point where he says that the character does turn around and say that he's he started using offensive and swearing language. So yeah, and then the 2 Americans in there is like, their dialogue is like every cliched Americanism that you can think of. It's quite bad in many ways. But anyway, we get to the film, and the film follows the storyline fairly closely, to a certain extent, because it starts out the same way with them coming to the fort and going in, and the bugler goes in. We don't know at that point that he's the Digby, the brother, but it goes out, and then he meets his brother, and then they do they burn down the fort, and then it goes back to the flashback story of them when they're kids, and Donald O'Connor is playing the young Beau Geste, which as an adult is Gary Cooper. Robert Preston is Digby, and Ray Milland is John Geste. But the thing is, the 2 brothers, the older brothers, are supposed to be twins in the book, but obviously Robert Preston and Gary Cooper are not twins, so that was sort of not even mentioned that they're twins. Uh, and they changed the name. There was some political things happening at this time because it's 1939, and they didn't want to offend the French, so they changed the French name of, or the uh, nationality of the French guy, the major, to Russian, and then there's another Russian that's a sort of bad guy that's in there as well. They change him to Russian rather than French. But no, it's a wonderful film. It's well made. Things happen rather rapidly, but that's the nature of sort of film. And it's well acted. Some things don't sort of fit because they're a little too old for what it is. And when the Beau found out that about uh, the gem, it was like when he was a young teen, and then it wasn't until he was an adult that he decided to act on it and steal it. But in the book, those two events are very close together, within like a week, if not a few days. And they got rid of one female character as well, for some reason, budget possibly, I don't know. Uh, but yeah, it's interesting that for political reasons they definitely got rid of the French name because they didn't want to offend the French and how brutally that they were being treated. So there was political correctness in a sense, but it's interesting that it didn't extend to the Arabs, because that obviously wasn't a concern. But it just wonders, like, political correctness changes through time. It was perfectly okay to treat Arabs badly, or a lot of people, like the one actor J. Carroll Nash that's on here, was a great character actor in the 30s and 40s. He took over a little more in the 40s, but he played like any nationality. He played a number of nationalities in films, like usually, as a character part, and whatever nationality he would play. So he's not, so they're stereotypical nationalities, but that wasn't considered, politically incorrect at the time, even though, like the Russians were okay to make fun of, or not fun of so much, but have the characters be Russian rather than French because they were afraid of offending the French at the time. So yeah, so things change, and but they, you know, I don't know how many, Arabs they would have had, or Middle Eastern people, if you want to, have them play themselves. I don't know if there's going to be many in Hollywood at this time. They never sought for this stuff either, but there were, but a lot of times uh, they used, there's always like English people playing, Indian or American white, playing North American Indians. They're playing Arabs, they're playing Chinese people, and all sorts of stuff. Today, that would be frowned upon uh, to do, but I don't. It's something that it was a bit of a need for them, because otherwise you'd have to change the characters and not have them being the nationality that they were, because they're not going to get actors that would be sufficient in numbers, let alone quality, a lot of times, to play those. So, but anyway, yeah, no, it's a great film. There's a lot of great stories with it, like Brian Donlevy. He played he was Lejeune, I think, in the book, and Molotov or Moloch, well, clearly a Russian name in here. And but the he's a great actor. He's been in a lot of stuff like The Great McGinty, several Preston Sturges films, and a bunch of other things. He's a good actor, but I guess he wasn't popular with other actors at all. Ray Milland apparently hated him, and there's a story where the character, he's supposed to stab uh, Brian Donlevy's character with the bayonet, and Brian Donlevy had this condition where if he saw blood, especially on himself, he'd faint. So he was wearing this vest, and he's supposed to get stabbed in the chest, but apparently when Ray Milan stabs him, he purposely missed the vest and got him sort of under the arm a little bit. It didn't wound him much, just a little thing. He had to go get a few stitches apparently, but he wound up fainting. And there's conflicting stories. Like one of them saying, "Oh, it was an accident. He didn't do it," but William Wellman says, "No, it wasn't an accident. He did it purposely." You know, so there's all sorts of things, and there's been many remakes or several remakes of this. There was an original silent version, which I've never seen. I'd love to, with Ronald Colman. Uh, but none of them they never kept I don't think the twins aspect of it, except I think in there was a Marty Feldman version, and they were twins, but they were different actors. So it was like a bit of a joke on it. It was a comedy. It was called the Beau Geste Last Remake, I think. But yeah, that one I've seen a long time ago, and I don't remember much about it. But I'd love to see the silent one. And it's just these there's great scenes in it, like the fight scenes, the where the Arabs are attacking the fort. It's just fantastic. The cinematography for it and how it's all choreographed, more or less, for this, because they had to build the fort, like they actually built the fort, on site. But anyway, I think I'll end it there because I have gone now. Oh no, well, I'm 26 minutes. If I can, just a few other things. Like, yeah, they built the fort, and they built a little oasis that was there, and then finally the fort was destroyed. It was torn down. The guy was paid to sort of take it all away, but he just sort of covered up with sand and says, "Oh, it's all done." And it's interesting. The commentary on it is William Wellman Jr., who wrote the book about his father that I read late last year, or maybe the beginning of January, and historian Frank Thompson, who's been a fanatic on this film. And it's kind of interesting. He's pointing out, he says, "Oh, you see that water tower there? You see the metal bands on that? I have one of those." Because he's been to the site, he's found the site, and he's taken away a whole bunch of stuff, like cartridges, bullet cartridges. He's taken away all sorts of stuff, I guess, from the what's there. Uh, so I found that quite interesting. That place is still there, and it's apparently nearby a place where they, people come to do dune buggies, and bikes, I guess, in the sand. Um, but also too, there was like I guess I think they were right near the border with Mexico, so they could, they would go across and they could actually walk. So they actually had buses to go to the brothels for the cast and crew, probably. Um, the cast and crew, well, the crew definitely, and the cast possibly, sort of for the weekends and the holidays. But yeah, no, it's a great film. If you're into classical film, I would suggest it. William Wellman is a great director. This is a great film, and the book is interesting. It's a little, like I say, the quibbles that I have with it is the French parts. There might be other versions that have the explanations, which would be nice to have a little bit of footnote in the translation of the French bits, and a little other things. But I'm more interested in this sort of 1,000-mile journey that they did, and it's apparently there's 3 other sequels sort of are written after this that are part of this in a sense. And then there's short stories. So someday I might get around to those because I'm curious. Because I found the little tantalizing bits of their journey, after leaving Zindendorf, more interesting than the whole story of up to that point. But anyway, that's it, BookTube. The next one that I'm going to do, which is a more recent one in the sense to this, 1939, is the 1967 production of To Sir with Love, based on the 1959 book by E.R. Braithwaite. And that'll be my next one. And then the one after that, I think, will be starting to read Treasure of the Sierra Madre by B. Travin, and it was done by it was Humphrey Bogart is in it. And John Huston directed it. But that'll be probably next weekend, I think, that I'll get to that. But the next one, as I say, will be To Serve with Love, with Lulu Sidney Poitier that was in it. And there's some interesting things about that, the film and the book, and the differences between them. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I may have went too long on the description of the book, but as I say, I'm just going superficial on these things in the comparisons and saying a few differences and a few tidbits about the film. It's sort of it's an interesting sort of comparison to see how they do adapt stuff and what they leave in and what they leave out, and if I can find out why they left it out or why they changed it, I will say it's like with this changing the French characters to Russian because they didn't want to offend the French at the time. Anyway, take care, BookTube. Hope you're reading well. Thank you.